Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Finn Peacock.
Hello, how are we? Yes, I'm half finished, believe it or not. That's why I have a Finnish sauna. Because if you finish, having a sauna is like, having a shower. It's good. I would highly recommend it. Bit hard on the solar system. Yeah, so as Ben said, I'm founder and CEO of a company called SolarQuotes. Since 2009, we've helped, I think it's coming up to 1 in 25 homes in Australia get quotes. So I reckon that's a house on every street, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I wrote this book called The Good Solar Guide, which... Can anyone else hear that echo? No? Just me. Cool. I wrote the book called The Good Solar Guide, which was published in June, and for at least 2 days was the best-selling book on Amazon Australia, so I was pretty happy about that. And I think it shows that people have an incredible interest in this. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? I'll start with the absolute basics, because this is really important. One thing I've learned over the last 10 years is, if you don't know the absolute fundamentals, you can get your knickers in a right twist when you're buying solar, or when someone's trying to sell you solar, or when you're trying to get your bills down. So we'll go over that. Then I'll go over solar system operation basics. Again, the absolute basics, but people get really confused about some real fundamentals, and if you get these things wrong, you get really confused about whether you're getting billed the right amount and how you can possibly get your bills down and whether your solar system's even working. Then I'm going to go through costs and savings, really up-to-date costs and savings from solar. Same with batteries. And then I'm going to go over the SA Home Battery Scheme. Who's heard of that? Yeah. Has anyone applied for it? No. Oh! How far have you got? Just an application? You haven't been approved for the rebate or anything? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. We'll get to that. I don't know if you saw the advertiser a couple of weeks ago. Our State Energy Minister was in there basically calling me an idiot because I said he thought I was being unkind about his home battery scheme. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about how to avoid crap solar, because you can buy a system, but if it's crap, it's not going to get your bills down and it's not going to help the environment, so we really want to avoid that. Alright, now, sorry for some of you in here if I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, but does anyone know what a kilowatt is? Anyone got an answer? Yes. And what does it measure? No, sorry. Power, yes. A kilowatt is a measure of power. Now, who thought energy and power were the same thing? Yeah. They're totally different. Well, they're not totally different, but they are different. And the distinction is really important if you want to buy solar, and especially batteries well. So kilowatts is a measure of power. What does that actually mean? That's how quickly you're producing or using electricity. So we all know the light bulb. A 20-watt bulb is not as bright as a 100-watt bulb. Because a 20-watt bulb, you can only squirt 20 watts of power into it. A 100-watts bulb, you can squirt 100 watts of power into it, which gives it more energy, which gives you a brighter light. So, pretty simple so far. The analogy I like to use is water in a hose. High power, the water's coming out nice and fast. High power in an electric system, the electricity is moving really fast down the wire. Low power, just some little drips out the end. So power is how quickly you're producing or using electricity. Now, that's important because solar systems are sized in kilowatts. So kilowatts, as you said, 1,000 watts. A solar system is sized by how much power it will generate, but only at midday when the sun is the strongest, on a perfect solar day. Now, what's a perfect solar day? A perfect solar day is really bright sunlight, but not too hot. And that's really important because solar panels, they use light to generate electricity. They do not use heat. If it gets too hot, they actually get less efficient. So the perfect solar day, lots of sunshine, but really cold, which is quite hard to achieve, unless you maybe live in Antarctica or something. So on a really hot day, you will actually produce less solar power than a really nice summer's day that's not so hot, because the solar panels will be more efficient because they don't get as hot. But we can talk about that later. And by the way, if anyone's got any questions, anything I say doesn't make sense, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Just jump in and ask me. Okay, so let's talk about a 3 kilowatt solar system. 3 kilowatts in 2018 is actually about the smallest system anyone will sell you right now. So it's actually quite a small solar system, but we'll use that as our example. So 3 kilowatt solar system will only produce 3 kilowatts on a perfect solar day at midday. And maybe a few minutes either way of midday. Maybe a bit more than a few minutes, but the rest of the time it will be producing less than 3 kilowatts. And it will actually almost never produce 3 kilowatts because you almost never get the perfect solar day. Now, why do we size a solar system in kilowatts and not just say 20 panels? Well, that's because solar panels are also sized in watts by their power, and they can vary in size. So typical solar panel, 250 watts, that's actually very small these days. Minimum's probably closer to 270 now, and they actually go up to about 400 watts now. They're getting bigger all the time. So that 3 kilowatt solar system, if you're using 250 watt panels, you're going to have 12 panels. And that is a 3 kilowatt system using 12 solar panels. Like I said, that's quite a small system. Now, we can talk about power, we can talk about, this many watts, that many watts, but what does that actually mean? A solar panel is 250 watts. What does that actually mean? How much power, is that? Well, that toaster there, that's about 700 watts. So that's about 3 solar panels at midday will produce just enough power to run that toaster. Now, let's have a quiz. The person that gets the closest gets a prize. Look at that guy's legs. So this is Robert Forsterman, who is he's one of the most powerful cyclists in the world. He's an Olympic track cyclist. If he pedals his bike and you connect his bike to a generator, he will generate power. How long do you reckon he can keep up 700 watts? Which is 3 solar panels, 3 little solar panels. What do you reckon? Any guesses? How long do you think you can do that for? 1 minute? 20 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
7 minutes.
7 minutes? Is all the toast ready? Well, shall we find out? Yeah, let's do it. You might not be able to hear this, but so it's quite strong. Absolutely insanely strong. So remember, this is 3 quite small solar panels he's trying to beat, essentially, at midday, on a good day.
Is he ready? Everything is okay? The handlebar, seat post, shoes, seat. Okay.
It's going to be a long video if it's 20 minutes, you're right.
Remember that when Robert loses power, the toaster will pop up.
So the toaster will pop up when he stops pedaling. It gets below a certain power. Right, so he's about 700 watts now. And I can tell you now, the friction on that bike is insane. He's pushing so hard now, you would not believe. So he's pretty much bang on 700 watts. Which is pretty much the limits of a human being pedaling. I've got a power meter on my bike and I average about 60 watts. I cycle every day. 3 little solar panels.
I can feel like taste the blood in your mouth. Want to lie down?
Mijn legs hurt. Ja,
Put them up. The monster is beaten.
We'll talk about kilowatt hours in a second. You'll notice that it doesn't say 700 kilowatt hours.
nobody can believe breakfast. The toaster, nobody can believe how much work it is to toast it. I know it now. It's crazy. It's fucking hard.
Insane. So, hope that gives you a feel for how much power 700 watts is and how much power just a typical solar panel will produce. So, just to go over that again, kilowatts is a measure of power. That's really important. Solar power systems are sized in kilowatts. Power is how fast the electricity flows into or out of the system. Does that make sense? Cool. Cool. Now, this thing called a kilowatt hour. See, we put an H on the end. Kilowatt hours and kilowatts are different. Kilowatt hour measures, anyone? Energy. But what is energy? Yes, exactly. It's power used over time. So if you have a bar heater, which pulls a kilowatt of power to heat your room, and you use it for 1 hour, you have used 1 kilowatt hour of energy, hence the name. So Robert, the cyclist, he generated 700 watts, but he only generated it for 90 seconds. Who said a minute and a half? Anyone? Who got closest? Did you say 1 minute? So because he only generated for a fraction of an hour, he only generated 0.02 kilowatt hours of energy. So energy and power are very different. The way I like to think about energy is the size of the bucket. If you've got your hose and you're squirting water into a bucket, the hose, the flow of the water is the power. The amount of water in the bucket represents the energy. Does that make sense? It's the amount of electricity used over time. So batteries, the size of a battery is measured by how much energy it stores, how much water's in the bucket, how big the bucket of energy is. You measure the size of a battery in kilowatt hours, and you measure the size of a solar system in kilowatts. Does that make sense? Now that's super important when you're buying solar and batteries, because a lot of salesmen will try and sell you a 10 kilowatt battery, which is a thing, but it doesn't make any sense unless they tell you how many kilowatt hours the battery is. And it's probably not a 10 kilowatt battery, it's probably a 5 kilowatt battery that stores 10 kilowatt hours. So you do have to be careful. Okay, so just to cement this. So top left, we've got a low power battery because it can't get energy in very fast, it can't charge very fast, and it can't discharge very fast. It's really important that you have enough power in your battery, no matter how much energy it stores, to power all the appliances you want it to power. A high power battery, top right, you can charge it really quickly, you can discharge it really quickly. A low energy battery is really small, it can't store much energy. A high energy battery is large, it stores a lot of energy. Does that make sense? Any questions? Is that helpful? Cool. When you get billed, here's a bill. Who likes getting electricity bills? I quite enjoy it these days because they give me money. They can only bill you for your energy. So they bill you based on how many kilowatt hours of energy you've used. Now, interestingly, I think in the not too distant future, they will also start billing you for the maximum amount of power you use. Does that sound weird? It's called a demand tariff. They're talking about it. So imagine you hired a car, and as well as charging you per kilometre driven, they put some little monitoring device on your car and said, hey, you did 130 kilometres an hour, so you have to pay a special speed charge for going too fast. there's a very real possibility that at some point in the future, we'll get charged for the maximum amount of power we draw over the billing period. And the justification for that is you need fatter wires. You need more infrastructure to deliver that power. But that's just a little aside. But at the moment, you get billed for how many kilowatt hours of energy you use.
I don't really understand that concept. Can you explain that concept?
Yeah, which one? About getting
might,
billed?
They might charge you for the maximum amount.
Yeah, so
Does it mean on one day, if you've got everything, all the air conditioners there in one day, they might bump up for the whole
Yeah,
day?
so if you have a smart meter, which everyone will have soon, that tells the electricity company how much power, how much energy you've used every half hour. And from that, they can work out the average power over that half hour. So there's a proposal, well, you can already get these tariffs, but they can't force you onto them. There's a proposal to force people onto a tariff where they say, right, in the last 3 months, over the billing period, in this half hour, you had your finished sauna on, you had your 7 other heaters on, you were charging your electric car and you used 20 kilowatts. So we're going to charge you an extra, I don't know, $1 a kilowatt. But we'll charge you that for every single day of the billing period. They're really nasty. If anyone ever offers to put you on a demand tariff, politely decline. You don't even have to be polite. But at the moment, that's not a thing they can force you onto. Unless you're a business, they can. But that's a different kettle of fish. So we've talked about energy and power. The last thing I'll say about energy and power, our 3 kilowatt solar system, how much energy does that produce every day? It produces 12 kilowatt hours of energy on an average day. So imagine that as soon as the sun came up, it was at full strength, and it was full strength all day, and then it set immediately, and say there was 10 hours of sunlight. If that was the case, you'd have 3 kilowatts times 10 hours, you'd get 30 kilowatt hours of energy. But that's obviously not what happens. The sun goes up slowly, gets full strength at midday, drops down perfectly symmetrically to sunset. So how do we work? Why is it 12 kilowatt hours? The reason is, if we have a look, this is a simplified, very simplified model, but say for the hour around midday, you do produce 3 kilowatts with your panels. For that hour, you've produced 3 kilowatt hours of energy. Then it drops down to, say, 2.2 either side of the hours either side of midday. This one here, 2.2 kilowatt hours of energy. 2.2 kilowatt hours of energy. Then drops down to 1.5 kilowatt hour of energy. Add all those bars up, you get to 12 kilowatt hours a day. And that's how you work it out. If you have to remember one number, the magic number is 4. If you multiply the size of the solar system by 4, give or take, that's the average amount of energy your solar system will produce every day over the year. You'll generate a lot more in summer in Adelaide and a lot less in winter, but that's the average. Does that make sense? Cool. So 3 kilowatt solar system will average 12 kilowatt hours of energy a day. 5 kilowatt solar system will average 20 kilowatt hours of energy a day. Much more in summer, much less in winter. Phew, so that's finished. Kilowatts is power, kilowatt hours is energy, solar system sized in kilowatts, battery sized in kilowatt hours, but you need enough power in your battery as well to do all the things you want it to do. It doesn't have to cover your entire house, but you want it to cover most of your appliances that are running most of the time. My battery can't cope with my sauna because it's limited to 5 kilowatts, so the grid tops up the rest. Okay, the last and final part of the basics. When you have a solar system, it is very, very unlikely that at any point in time, your solar system will be producing exactly the right amount of power to satisfy your house's power demand. It will happen sometimes, but it will be very, very rare. So there's pretty much always one of either two things happening. Either your solar system is providing too much solar for your house to handle, or your solar system is not providing enough solar to satisfy your house. Your house needs more than your solar system can produce. So what does your solar system do in those two situations. This is where people can get very confused. And I hope this explains it well. If you have too much solar, don't overthink it. It's really very simple. It will try and satisfy your house's demand first, and the surplus will simply go into the grid. And happily, you will get paid for that under almost all circumstances. So at the moment, 4.7 kilowatts, well, 5.5, 2.1 going into the house, the remainder goes into here. That plus that must equal that. Does that make sense? That's an animation from Tesla monitoring app, and it's the best illustration of it I've seen. It seems to make it quite intuitive. And that's from my house a couple of days ago. You can see the sun gets stronger and not as strong. I think it's clouds going over. Okay, so that's when there's too much solar. The surplus solar simply goes into the grid. Obviously, this energy here, you're not paying for it, because it's just coming straight from your solar panels into the house. So you're not using any grid energy at all in this situation, so it's costing you nothing to run your house. So that's good. What happens when there's not enough solar? Then it's really simple. The grid will top it up. So the house needs 2.3, it's only getting 1.7, so the grid's topping it up with 0.5. So you're only paying for this power coming here. So if you did that for an hour, you'd pay for half a kilowatt hour of energy. It's just gone down. And as you can see, the sun gets stronger and weaker as clouds go past. Does that make sense? Did people realise that's how solar works? Oh, cool. Yes?
Just one question in respect to that. If you've got a battery system brought into it,
Yes.
presumably on that diagram will sit between your system and your solar panels and the external, so that, for example, if you are producing too much energy, you go into the battery first and then the... Is that right?
That's exactly right. Imagine the battery's down here, which it actually is on the app, but I've deleted it to keep it simple. What this system would do here, if the battery wasn't full, what this would do here is, instead of taking the energy from the grid, it would take it from your battery. So the system will always, your house will always try to use solar first, then battery, last resort grid. If we go backwards, what would happen here is, if the battery wasn't full, instead of pushing 2.6 kilowatts into the grid, it would push it into your battery. And as soon as the battery was full, it would push it into the grid. So the way that works is, the priorities are, the solar will always charge the house, charge the battery, last resort, export to the grid. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Just two quick questions, please. Are the panels typically 250 watts? Is that almost an international standard?
No, they're not. I use 250 because it's easy maths. Typical now is about 300. They get bigger all the time. 300 plus at the moment. Yeah.
And sorry, my head's sort of hit a wall with respect to age. I get the 4 times the 3 kilowatt system gives you your storage or your energy, which still is kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
Which was equated to 12.
Yeah.
So is that how much energy is available over a 12-hour period?
Yeah, over a typical day.
Or only when you're in that peak sunshine?
I'll show you a picture in a minute that will explain that to you.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, it's the next slide. So that's lucky. So this, I think, explains what you were asking. So this is a typical day in summer. This is actually from my house. So this is at night. This is midnight. We put the dishwasher on at night because it's noisy. We want to be able to hear the telly. This is the fridge compressor, I think. And we wake up for breakfast. Just beat sunrise because Chantal, my wife, gets up early to go running. And then Then the solar kicks in, goes up, up, up. And so if it's red, that means we've drawn it from the grid. This is without a battery. It's before I got a battery. When it's green, that means we're self-consuming solar energy. So this situation here is too much solar situation that we just saw. So we're generating 4 kilowatts, we're using 3 kilowatts, self-consuming 3 kilowatts, and about a kilowatt will be going out into the grid. So that whole area there, that you're generating 12 kilowatt hours of energy there. Obviously, you're generating a lot more energy around the middle of the day. So what you try and do, and this is one of the secrets to tiny bills with just solar, is, and you can see we've done it quite successfully, you try and use all your electricity and keep it under the boundary of the solar. Does that make sense? Because then the solar is covering your usage. So as you can see, on this day, I drew bugger all from the grid, really. I mean, this is quite high power. This is the dishwasher, it's the drying. That's heating the water, that's drying the water. Whenever you use heat, you use a lot of energy, as a rule. So it uses a lot of power, but for a very short amount, so there's very little energy used there. And the drying, a bit more power, but for very little time, so there's very little energy. We use very little at night. Yeah, so there's very little red, so we're going to get billed for very little energy. So that's how we get low bills without a battery. We're saving loads because all this green, if we didn't have the solar, we'd be pulling from the grid at 36 cents a kilowatt hour, something like that. All the yellow is going back into the grid. So like I say here, if you're self-consuming your solar energy, you're saving whatever the cost of your electricity is. And in South Australia, about 36 cents, maybe a little more now. If you're exporting it, you're earning money, but you're only earning whatever the feed-in tariff is. The feed-in tariff is how much you get paid for putting stuff into the grid. And when this was taken, we were on a 16-cent feed-in tariff. So you can see, self-consumed energy, more valuable than exported energy. Yes, sir?
Just ask, is it a problem with moved recently that at the middle of the day, on sunny days, that the actual grid system won't have the capacity for the tipping point of so many people getting solar without batteries to buffer or store?
Yeah, so what you've heard about is, it's not that the grid hasn't got the capacity. There's plenty of capacity for the electricity to flow down the wires. It's a voltage problem. So Australia is plagued with high voltage on the grid. The Australian standard for voltage is 230 volts. It's not 240. It's 230 volts minus 6% plus 10%, I think. But the Australian grid is generally much higher than that. Now, when you're exporting to the grid, so you can see here, typical solar system, middle of the day, you got a lot of exports here, right? If you want to push your solar energy into the grid, it has to be at a slightly higher voltage than the grid, because voltage is electrical pressure. So lots of solar systems exporting do increase the voltage of the grid. Now if the grid voltage was down at 230 volts, it wouldn't be a problem. But because the grid voltage is high anyway, for lots of reasons, basically a shoddily maintained grid, in my opinion, that pushes, the grid voltage gets higher around midday, especially on sunny days. If that happens, if the grid voltage goes over 253 volts, I think, the Australian standard for inverters says those inverters have to derate, they have to push out less power. And if it gets over another threshold, they have to shut down altogether. And that's what's happening with some people's solar systems. Middle of the day, high grid voltage, inverter shuts down. If that happens, you have to determine how much of it is your fault. It might be your fault if your wires from the solar system into the grid are too thin, because the thinner the wire, the harder you have to push. Or it might be that you have a high grid voltage in the street, which is very, very common. I've got it. So when you got your solar system installed, you should have had a test from the installer to measure essentially what's called the voltage rise in your cable. So you should get that documentation off the SolarQuotes, and then you should also measure your grid voltage, which you might need equipment for, you might not, depending on your inverter. And then you need to put a case to SA Power Networks, say, hey, yeah, I've got proof, my grid voltage is too high. You've got a legal requirement to fix it because the Australian standard is this. So that's what you need to do. But it is an increasing problem because the more solar, the higher the grid voltage at midday. But it's a high grid voltage in the middle of the night, so it's an endemic problem without the solar. Yo, I know you.
Hey, how you going, mate?
Good.
Just with this, maybe just want to touch on some inverters can actually be adjusted to tolerate the higher grid voltage in some cars.
So you have a setting in your inverter. You can say, start ramping down at this level, but it's illegal to put it too high. There's an Australian standard So a good installer will put it at the max. There's no point having it any lower than the maximum that's legally allowed, so your inverter shuts down less often. The ultimate solution, though, is to get your local transformer tapped down. Well, the ultimate solution is to have active voltage control on the grid, but that's expensive. I don't know if that will ever happen. But you can get SA Power Networks to tap the inverter down. That brings the whole voltage, the baseline down, and that usually fixes the problem. But yeah, it's an issue. Now, something really important about these two numbers. They depend on your retailer, and they can vary wildly. So there's lots of tools online. I've got one on my website, SolarQuotes, which is designed for solar owners, because what it does is, you put in your postcode, it shows you all the electricity retailers that serve your postcode and what they charge. But crucially also, what they charge, but what they'll pay you for putting the electricity back into the grid. And then I don't know of any other tool that's got this. You can sort them by feed-in tariff. So if I put in my postcode, it varies a lot, as you can see. Click Energy will give me 22 cents a kilowatt hour for the surplus solar I put into the grid, which is very high. Momentum Energy, boo hiss, who are promoted by Mozo, not by me, will only give you 6.8 cents. Some people will give you 0, which is nice. So make sure you're getting a good deal on your electricity. So it's also obviously important that you're paying low usage rates. Click Energy, don't go with them. Their usage rates are too high, and that's almost always the case. The people with the absolute highest feed-in tariff hammer you on the usage charges. I actually switched to these guys recently. They've got really good usage charges, and they've got 20% feed-in tariff, and they've got no lock-in, and I think I've got 2 bills from them now, well, 2 credits from them, and it's really, really good. What you can do with this, and what I recommend you do, is don't worry about switching retailers when you first get solar. Wait until you've had solar for a quarter, and then you can use this tool or other ones like it to put in how much, over the last 3 months, how much you exported, how much you imported, what your bill was, and it will tell you what your bill would have been with these other retailers, so you can get the balance right between feed-in tariff and usage tariff. Yes?
Yeah, I've got the old system, it's 44% tariff plus whatever.
Yeah, you're on the premium feed-in tariff until 2028.
Yeah, that's right.
Now you can still do this, and you get this plus 44 cents.
Yeah.
So you could be getting 66 cents, although I wouldn't go with click. You could be getting 64 cents,
Okay.
which is worth doing.
Yeah, I say use power at night as compared to using power in the day, because power is actually cheaper than 44% plus 22%.
You got an off-peak meter.
No, I just think the feed-in tariff is better for me to be exporting.
Yes, sorry for you. Yes, because your feed-in tariff is
It's excessive.
64 cents. If you go with them, for example, you want to pump as much out into the grid as possible.
That's right.
Yeah.
I tell my wife that. She says,
Right. If you're on a premium feed-in tariff, it's worth more than self-consumption. So yeah, try and use all your electricity at night. Switch everything off in the day. Maybe become nocturnal. Night shift job or something. Yeah, you get that till 2028. It's pretty good.
It gets spanned if I do something to the system. Like it gets the high feed-in tariffs taken off.
Yeah, if you modify your system or buy a battery, you'll lose your high feed-in tariff.
Yeah.
How big is your system?
It's only 2 kilowatts.
Okay. So you might not export that much with a small system, but
Yeah, I would try not to use it.
yeah, for sure.
Got to use something.
Okay, so let's have a look at the cost of solar panels. Using 250, even though it's small these days because it's an easy number to do the maths. Remember the magic multiplier 4? A 250 watt panel will produce, on average, about, in Adelaide, 1 kilowatt hour of energy per day. So what's that? So we can work out the cost and benefit per solar panel. So over 25 years, a good solar panel should last at least 25 years. Crap one will probably last 3 years, but we'll get to that. If you self-consume, absolute best case, which is rare, if you self-consume 100% of the energy, very hard to do, you could probably do it with one solar panel, you'll save about 36 cents per day because you're generating 1 kilowatt hour per day, times 365, how many days in the year, times 25 years, about $3,300 over the life of the panel. Best case. Worst case, you're exporting it all to the grid, and then I'm making a big assumption here that you can get this feed-in tariff for 25 years. Probably can't do that, I have no idea. I can't predict the future. But if you exported it at today's rates, you'd make $1,500 from that $250 investment over 25 years. And that's a very, very basic calculation, no electricity price inflation, just using today's numbers and going out for 25 years. And that $250 is how much each solar panel costs, including installation and the inverter, because give or take, 5 kilowatt system, 5,000 watts, costs about $5,000. A bit more for a good one, but keeps the numbers easy. Costs $250, generates 1 kilowatt hour a day, saves $1,500 to $3,300 over the life of the panels. The warranted life of the panels, if they're good panels. Now let's talk about batteries. Now there's a lot of hype around batteries at the moment. So just have a filter on when you read the mainstream media about batteries. Batteries are going to be really super important in the future if we want to get to 100% renewables or close. Batteries and storage. But at the moment, the hype around them is unbelievable. So this is a tweet from Bill Shorten a couple of days ago. I'll read it. I won't try and do an impression of him. Fiona was paying about $2,000 in power bills a year. She installed battery technology to store the energy produced by solar panels on her roof. She now pays $500, a 75% reduction. I want more Australian households using this technology to reduce their power bills. Now he's obviously trying to sell his battery rebate. Does everyone hear about that? He wants to give everyone $2,000 to install a battery. I mean, is it me or is he implying that it's the battery that's saving the money there? I think it is. I mean, look at the picture while it's a video. You'll see this all the time. He's implying that the battery is saving her $1,500 a year. It's not. The battery's probably saving her $400 a year. The rest is the solar. Solar's produce the vast majority of the savings for almost all Australians. The battery's like the cream on top. So there's this message going out there, and we're hearing it every day. People are going, oh, I need batteries to get low bills. No, you don't. You can get tiny bills with solar if you do it right. This is from the paper a couple of weeks ago. Battery-powered homes on the way for blah, blah, blah. They're not battery-powered, they're solar-powered. Batteries don't generate electricity. Residents of a new master plan community will save $2,000 a year in electricity bills thanks to groundbreaking technology. Solar panels were invented in 1950-something. An Australian first, smart battery systems. They don't talk about the solar because solar's kind of old hat now. So people are forgetting that solar is what saves you most of your money. And if you haven't got solar, you can't put cheap electricity into the batteries. So just be aware when you read stuff in the mainstream media. Hi.
Typically you're not using a lot of power during the day because no one's home.
Yep.
So your electricity is not drawing. So the solar systems, it's almost like why bother without a battery. That way you can use that battery at night and have all your systems running.
Worst case, you export all your energy. That $250 investment will return you $1,500. It's not as good as the $3,300, but it's still actually pretty good because you're getting paid 20 cents to export it at the moment in Adelaide. That's a really good feed-in tariff. If you divide the cost of the system by the kilowatt hours generated, you're probably paying about 3 cents to generate that kilowatt hour. So you're right, it's more valuable if you self-consume it, but even if you don't use anything during the day, you will use something during the day, but even if you don't put anything on timers, like your washing machine, your dishwasher, you don't pre-cool your house, you don't preheat your house, you don't have any standby loads, even if you export it all, in Adelaide, well in South Australia, it's still a pretty good return. It changes the return from about 3 years to about 7 years if you export it all at the moment. So it's still a pretty good investment. We'll talk about batteries in a sec. Right, so you've got a kilowatt hour of energy that your solar panel has produced, and you want to store it in a battery. so you can use it at night, yeah? Cool. So to store that kilowatt hour of energy that one panel produces on average will cost you about $1,000. So you're not going to buy a battery that's 1 kilowatt hour big, you're going to probably buy a 10 kilowatt hour battery, and that will cost you about $10,000, a bit more, but we'll say $10,000. So electricity costs you 36 cents a kilowatt hour. You put the solar in the battery, use the solar at night, so you don't pull that 36 cent kilowatt hour from the grid at night. How much money have you saved? Anyone? By storing your solar, storing 1 kilowatt hour of solar, using it at night instead of the grid, how much money have you saved? The answer is, people are saying 36 cents, it's not. Because you're putting the solar energy into the battery, you're choosing not to export it to the grid. If you'd exported it to the grid, you could have got 16 to 20 cents. So let's say 16, so the maths is easy. As you can tell, I like easy maths. You're really saving 36 cents minus 16, say. So you're saving closer to 20 cents. So that's an error that a lot of people make when they're doing, back of the envelope calculations for batteries. They're saying, I'm not importing this much energy from the grid at night, so I'm saving this much, and they're just multiplying it by the usage tariff. Don't forget about the feed-in tariff. You have to subtract that. So if you save 20 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $73 per year for your $1,000 investment, which is a cheap battery, which is $730 over 10 years. And I don't know of any batteries that are warranted for more than 10 years. They should last more than 10 years, but the manufacturer will only warrant them for 10 years.
Excuse me, Ken. You probably don't, but how does that equation work out when you take into account price rises of electricity?
We'll get to that.
Okay,
I think you might sell batteries.
So your suggestion by that is that you're going to save $7,300 on a $10,000 battery, which will be dead.
It won't be dead. It shouldn't be dead in 10 years. It should last longer than the warranty, but no one knows how much longer.
The storage will be diminishing over time.
Well, yeah, I'll get to that too. So the battery manufacturers will say, it'll last 20 years. I'll say, okay, warranty for 20 years. Oh, no. That's the way I think. Maybe I'm just suspicious. They're warranted for 10 years, that's the fact. I expect they'll last longer than their warranty. How much longer? I don't know. No one's had one of these batteries that long. Yeah. Okay, so let's compare the pair. Solar, you spend $250, you get $60 to $130 per year back. The payback, 2 to 4 years. Wow, all right. Battery, you spend $1,000, you get $70 per year back. Simple payback, 15 years. This is all, as you said, at today's prices, but we'll get to that. So you can see solar's the really good investment. Don't put off solar because you're waiting for batteries. You don't need batteries to make solar a good investment. There's quite a few people putting off solar until batteries come down in price. Well, they're losing a lot of money by doing that. Now, what a lot of salespeople might do is what I call blended payback. They'll sell you a solar and battery system, and when that payback's really good, that payback's not so good, but you blend them together, do the maths, it works out about 8 years for a solar and battery system, which is cool. It pays for itself. In 8 years, that's quite a good payback. So if you want to buy one of those systems and you're happy with that payback, that's cool. Go for it. But what they should tell you, in my opinion, is that, say it's a $20,000 system, $6,000 of that might be for the solar, $14,000 might be for the battery. Maybe you just spend the $6,000 and get a really good payback, get a much better payback, and spend an extra $14,000, $15,000 to drag the payback out to 8 years total. So just be aware of that, blended payback. If you're buying a solar and battery system, you might want to ask them to split out the payback of the solar and the battery, because the battery will be the vast majority of the cost of the system. And as was touched on, do be careful. Batteries do degrade over time. Some are worse than others. This is actually quite an old graph. This is from the Powerwall 1, which is a very old battery you can't get anymore. But when they first brought that out, I was the first one, I think, in the world to point out that they only warranted it, it was a 6.4 kilowatt hour battery. They only warranted it for 5 and a bit kilowatt hours for the first 2 years, 4 and a bit for the next 3 years, and 3 and a bit for the final 10 years of its life. So have a look at the warranty and have a good read of it and see how much it degrades. Like I say, some are better than others, but it's worth checking, because that will hurt your payback too. Okay, I'm going to talk about the SA Home Battery Scheme, and then I'm going to talk about the future and crystal balls and how that affects battery buying rationale. The South Australian Home Battery Scheme, in a nutshell, you get a subsidy of $500 per kilowatt hour of battery, up to a maximum of $6,000. So if you buy a 12 kilowatt hour battery, you get the maximum rebate of $6,000. If you buy a 13 kilowatt hour battery, you still get $6,000 because it's maxed out. If you have an energy concession card, you get $600 a kilowatt hour, but still a maximum of $6,000, so it maxes out at 10 kilowatt hours. So it's generous. If you can get a 10 kilowatt hour battery without the subsidy for $10,000, this is halving the price of the battery, so that's pretty good. You've got a very limited choice of battery until January. The government decided to only allow South Australian assembled batteries to be part of the scheme, which kicked off 2 weeks ago for the first 9 weeks. So until about January the 1st, you can only buy batteries that are made in South Australia. There aren't any batteries that are made in South Australia. So they're allowing people that promise to make batteries in South Australia. And are starting to build factories, assembly plants, to assemble these batteries in South Australia. So there are 3 batteries you can buy right now on the scheme, and it opens up to many, many more in January. So at the moment, the first guys off the block, Sonnen, German company, 10 kilowatt hour battery from Sonnen, good batteries, very expensive, $12,000 after the subsidy. If you want it to back up your home, you have to pay about $2,000 extra. If you want to put it outside, you have to pay about, I think, $1,500, $2,000 extra. So $12,000, if you're saving $700 a year, which you would on today's tariffs, it's about a 17-year payback after the subsidy. Okay, Alpha ESS have just been announced. They've just joined the scheme. They're going to make batteries in South Australia too. For a similar size battery, it's about $7,500 after the subsidy. That includes backup in the box. You don't have to pay any extra earlier, and you're pretty sure you can put this outside as well. So the payback at today's tariffs is about 10.5 years. So that's pretty cool. Apparently these are made in China, but they're going to be doing some assembly in South Australia, so they get to sell them early. Apparently there's a guru called Glenn who really likes these. He's a battery guru in South Australia. He's had one of these for about 2 years. He reckons they're really good. So they're worth considering if you want it cheaper than the Sonnen. There's a third one called Iguana that was announced last week. They're also going to start making them in South Australia, but they refused to tell me how much they cost, so I'm not going to tell you about them. Because they're probably really expensive. Who knows? Pretty fundamental information, so they can get lost. After January, I think, and this is a guess, but looking at pricing and wholesale pricing and what's available in other states, you should be able to get a retrofitted 10 kilowatt hour battery system for about $5,000, maybe that's being a bit optimistic, $6,000 after the subsidy. So more like a 7-8 year payback. But certainly worth, I think, you're not going to miss out if you wait till January and see what's around. Now, all those paybacks and tariff... Yes, sir? Yes? Yes? 10 kilowatt hours? It will store 10 kilowatt hours of energy. It's like a rain tank. Sorry? So if you've got a 10 kilowatt hour battery, most batteries are rated at about 5 kilowatts of power. So you drained it at full whack. Say if you drain it at 10 kilowatts, yeah, you drain it in an hour. If you could charge it at 10 kilowatts, you charge it in an hour. It's probably 5 kilowatts of power, 10 kilowatt hours of storage, so you could charge it in 2 hours and drain it in 2 hours. Yeah. You've got a very inefficient home if you're pulling 5 kilowatts a lot of the time.
Does that take into account that the lithium-ion battery just discharged to zero?
So generally when they sell the battery, they'll give you a usable kilowatt hours. So I'm talking about usable kilowatt hours, which is what you can actually use. It doesn't really matter what else. You know, if there's a bigger battery in there, if you can't use it. So the interesting thing about batteries is those paybacks I gave you are based on what the tariffs are right now. If we know anything, it's that tariffs are going to change in the future. Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? Some people are saying that electricity prices are going to go down in Australia because so much renewables is coming online and renewables are so cheap. Other people are saying electricity prices are going to go through the roof. I don't know. So will the usage tariff go up or down? I don't know, and I'm not going to try and guess. Will the feed-in tariff go down or will it go up? I think it will probably go down. But if the feed-in tariff goes down, that probably means that wholesale price of electricity has gone down, so the usage will go down. So the difference might stay the same. Will demand tariffs become compulsory? Remember I gave you that scare story about getting charged for the maximum amount of power you use, like driving a car and getting charged for the maximum speed. They may become compulsory, and if they do, a good battery can chop off that peak, and that can save you a lot of money because those tariffs are brutal, the ones that are around at the moment that are voluntary for residential. Well, TOU, that means time of use. That's where they charge you a different usage tariff depending on whether it's the morning, the middle of the day, or the evening. You can get those already, but in South Australia they're not compulsory. If they become compulsory, I don't recommend going on one, but if you're forced to, batteries can save you more money because they can charge when it's cheap and you can use them when it's really expensive. And when it's really expensive, it tends to be like, in New South Wales, like 54 cents a kilowatt hour for peak periods. So the more expensive electricity is, the more batteries save you. Will they change the standing charges? That's the charges you're charged whether you use any electricity or not. You know, if they go up or go down, it changes the economics. Yes?
I was going to say, is there a suggestion there that the batteries are as much for the benefit of the system and the power supplier of this voltage and overheating and so on you're talking about as much as actually our own benefit? Are we going to be buffering a system that actually allows the ageing poles and wires?
Oh, I could go on. Yeah, yes, they help the grid. Yes, because, I mean, at the simplest level, they reduce the peak. Because when the sun goes down, the houses with batteries, instead of switching from solar to the grid, switch from solar to battery. And that's the biggest peak, is the early evening peak. So they help there. They help, you know, you can make an argument, I won't go into it now, that they help prolong the life of coal-fired power stations. But, you know, I've got lots of blog posts about all that stuff, if you're interested. It's quite interesting. So, the rational economic decision, you know, say you're worried about the feed-in tariff going to zero. If the feed-in tariff goes to zero, which it could, because at the moment, in a lot of states, there isn't a mandatory feed-in tariff. It's at the behest of the retailer, and it's only high because there's retailer competition. If the retailers all decide to give us a zero feed-in tariff, batteries become much more valuable because you subtract the feed-in tariff from the usage tariff. So you might say, I'm going to buy a battery because I'm worried about the feed-in tariff dropping to zero. Well, the rational time to buy a battery if you're worried about the feed-in tariff dropping to zero is when the feed-in tariff drops to zero, right? Same with everything else. But this big subsidy in South Australia totally skews that logic. They've thrown a spanner in the works because it's not going to be around forever, and it's pretty generous. So the way you might want to think about it, and I think this is a reasonable, rational way of thinking about it, is if you buy a 10 kilowatt hour battery, and you've got a nice big solar system, say 6 kilowatts, and you've got a reasonable consumption, you're probably going to be 85 to 95% powered by solar. So you're going to have tiny, tiny bills for the lifetime of the battery in the solar system. And it doesn't matter, because you're only using 10-15% of the grid compared to what you used to, it doesn't matter what they do with tariffs, it doesn't matter what they do with feed-in tariffs. If you've got smart software, hopefully it doesn't matter what they do to demand charges, because your battery will be clever enough to lock those peaks off. So you kind of got insurance against them buggering around with the electricity system for the next 10 years. So if with the subsidy in South Australia the battery can just about pay for itself, which it can. You're seeing kind of 10-year paybacks, 7-year paybacks, 8-year paybacks. Maybe it's actually rational to buy a battery, because you're protecting yourself. It's kind of insurance against, like I said, them buggering around with tariffs and all that stuff. And it is a nice feeling getting a very low electricity bill. If there wasn't a subsidy, I'd say it's kind of irrational to buy a battery for economic reasons. Yes?
Just a question. If I don't have a solar system,
Yes.
can I still buy a battery and get the subsidy?
Why do you want to do that?
I'm just asking.
Okay. I'm fairly sure you need a solar system, don't you? That's one of the clauses, yeah. No, it's only to houses with solar systems, yep.
Can you buy the solar system and then get the battery later? Or
Yeah, it's really easy to retrofit a battery to a solar system. There's a thing called AC coupling, which basically means if you AC couple a battery to your solar system, you're going in on the 240 volts. Every grid-connected solar system ever installed in Australia is compatible with a AC coupled battery, so it's easy to do.
Is that what they mean when they say battery ready?
Battery ready, yeah, we can talk about... Battery ready means a lot of things. You don't need a battery ready solar system. When people go through my website, we ask them if they want a battery ready system, because then they have a conversation with the solar installer about how big the solar array is going to be so it can charge the battery even in winter when you get half the sun, where they're going to put the battery relative to the inverter and the switchboard. So it's good to think about those things when you buy solar, but you do not need a battery ready system. You do not need a special inverter that's battery ready. You can buy them, and then you can just plug your battery into the inverter, but in 2-3 years' time, there may not be any batteries that are compatible with it, so don't do it. Just if you're not going to buy batteries in the very near future, just buy a regular solar system. The most important thing is that you get at least 6.6 kilowatts of solar, because that's generally what you're going to need to charge the battery through winter, in an Adelaide winter. So does that make sense about the subsidy kind of skewing the logic? So it is actually, you can get it to pay for itself. Bear in mind, these are best case savings, so if you only use half the battery every night, you're only going to get half the savings. But I just wanted to say that if there wasn't a subsidy, I'd say for economic reasons buying a battery is irrational. With a subsidy, it's kind of rational, if you want one. Yes?
When I originally put in the solar panels, it was a subsidy at that time, and the cost of the panels was quite high. Once the subsidy left, the cost of the panels decreased. Is it reasonable to assume that perhaps
So the
subsidy just goes to the manufacturer?
The federal... Oh, right, okay, yeah. I think batteries... I think a bit of that goes on. I think there's less pressure on margins. I know one person in the solar industry that took a really good battery off the table when the subsidy came in, because it was quite a low margin offer. Yeah, I think it does skew the market a little bit, I think. Yeah. I mean, battery prices are falling, but it's going to take a long time before they fall enough to take $500 a kilowatt hour off the battery, so bear that in mind. The other thing I want to talk about is backup. So the other reason you get a battery, of course, is for backup. And you've got to think about what backup is worth for you. Does your grid go down much? So this is a video. I've got a battery. I've got a Tesla Powerwall 2. It does backup really well. A few weeks ago, the whole street went down for about 4 hours. And I was cycling home. And this is what it looked like. There's me cycling down my street in South Brighton. Bear with me. I'm cycling, I'm going like this with one hand, holding my phone. Yes. So you see that beacon of light? That's my house, because it's running off battery. It's pretty cool, hey? So that was really super awesome. I mean, very convenient. You just feel really like a real smug bastard, really. That's pretty cool, hey? Hey kids, so that's it. So what's backup worth to you? So the other thing you might want to think about is, and that's a personal decision, it might be worth $0 to you, it might be worth a couple of grand to you, that's a personal thing. And then maybe you take that off the cost of the battery before you do your payback calculations, but that's a personal choice. But if we are talking about backup, if backup is important to you, it's really important to know that not all batteries will back up your house. So imagine you spend 10 grand, 15 grand on a battery, you have a power cut, and your house goes down with the rest of the street. You'd feel like a real nana, especially if you showed all your neighbours your big shiny battery. So if you buy a battery, you might as well get backup, that's what I say. Because a lot of batteries come with backup at no very little extra cost. There's a bit more wiring involved. There's two types of backup. There's regular backup and then what I call apocalypse-proof backup. What's the difference? Regular backup, the grid goes down, your house is powered off the battery. When the battery runs out of juice, your house dies as well. You lose all your power as well. Apocalypse-proof backup, grid goes down, your house runs off the solar and the batteries when the sun's up. That's like an extra level of backup. So some batteries don't do backup, some batteries do kind of regular boring backup. The really good batteries do what I call apocalypse-proof backup. If you're going to get a battery, you might as well get one that has proper backup. If the sun's up, the solar panels will charge the battery and power your house. And if you're careful with your energy use, you can essentially go for weeks. Yeah, you're basically running off the grid. I mean, you have to be very careful with your energy use. Like, don't be putting the oven on, so that'll pull 3 kilowatts. Don't put the sauna on. You drain the battery in no time. Yes?
Just a quick question. Average size of batteries so what's the average size of battery?
About 10 kilowatt hours. If you, physical, right, okay. So if you buy a Tesla Powerwall 2, which is about the most dense one you can get, it's about that high. If you buy a Sonnen, it's about that high. About that wide. About that. Is that right? Yeah, 26 centimetres wide. Deep. 26 centimetres deep, yeah. That wide, that deep. I always exaggerate lengths. Yes?
Do you have to put them under cover or can they be out in the weather?
Depends on the battery. Most batteries can go outside. Like I say, the Sonnen needs a special enclosure. I think they're bringing out a new one that can go outside out of the box. It depends on the battery. Yeah.
In the past, there have been some media stories about the batteries being a fire hazard.
Yep.
And whether that's a real issue or a media issue.
Batteries are, in theory, very, very dangerous. They store a lot of energy in a small space, so we've got to take it seriously. So, yeah, you have to bear that in mind. If you drive your car into one of these batteries, it could be really nasty because it will release a lot of energy. Some battery chemistries are, in theory, safer than others. So, in theory, I think Sonnen uses pretty much the safest battery chemistry you can get. I think you can shoot bullets into the thing and it doesn't. I've seen videos of people shooting bullets into them and they're fine. The Tesla one, which I've got, I live for danger, so I have a Tesla one. They're a bit more dangerous. So they're actively cooled. They pump liquid through the batteries, around the batteries to cool them down. They're much denser. They are, in theory, more dangerous. In theory, they can explode easier. Bear that in mind. I don't think it's an issue. I mean, there's 250,000 Tesla cars driving around. There's only a few dozen have caught fire. They're very cleverly designed. But yeah, you've got to take it seriously. I wouldn't put a Tesla in a garage where a car might drive into it accidentally. I've got friends at the CSIRO and they're telling me they're planning on building a battery crushing machine and they're going to take these batteries and crush them and be a long way away when they do that and film the explosion, so that'll be good. Yeah, but I mean, you've got to treat it with respect.
Zinc bromide batteries, are they viable for household use or that's just too big?
They are, I think they are viable for household use. They're about $12,000 for 10 kilowatt hours these days.
Yeah.
They're not going to catch fire because I think zinc bromide is a fire retardant. Yeah. It's like a really horrible, nasty chemical, so if it leaks, you're in trouble, I think. But yeah, if you're worried about fire, that might be a good one. Like in a bushfire zone or something. Yeah, maybe. They're worth considering. Yes?
How heavy is the battery?
My battery is, I think, 100 kilograms. 13.5 kilowatt hours. I think it's 100 kilograms.
Tesla wasn't on your price list.
That's not available now, but it will be available in January because they're not making them or promising to make them in South Australia.
Were they sort of, you obviously bought one, were they on the
I got one really cheap. On the next slide, I'll show you how to get one for almost nothing, if you're lucky, if you hack the rebate, the battery subsidy. The list price of a Powerwall, they've just gone up in price. List price, fully installed, 13.5 kilowatt hours, including backup and everything, apocalypse-proof backup, $15,500. With the subsidy, you take $6,000 off that, it would be $9,500. But, good question. Do you want a really cheap Tesla? I'm not saying you can get this deal, but in theory, I think it's possible. And I rang up Simply Energy, and they implied it was possible in January. Simply Energy are building, I think, 1,000 battery VPP, which basically means virtual power plant, which means they network the batteries. And Simply Energy can control the batteries, so bear that in mind. And they can ramp the outputs up and down, and they can support the grid, and they can make money when electricity is high. Electricity prices are high. And anyway, it's called a VPP. That's how I got my Tesla. I bought it from AGL. I paid $3,800 for it because I agreed to be part of the AGL VPP. Now, I think that's about sold out now because if that was available, it would be free with the rebate. I don't have a problem with being part of the VPP. AGL haven't even used it in VPP mode yet. If you join that, their offer at the moment is $7,300 before the subsidy for a Powerwall 2. In theory, I stress, don't come knocking on my door if you can't get this deal. In January, you can apply the rebate to that and get it for $1,299. That is a bargain.
Does that mean you have to be with the Simply Energy?
You have to be with Simply Energy for X number of years. With AGL, it's 5 years. I don't know. I haven't looked at the small print. That's the phone number if you want to ring them up and see if it's possible. I rang them up and they said they would call me as soon as it was clarified. I imagine if you can get that deal, it will sell out. The South Australian Battery Subsidy website specifically says you can use the subsidy with other kind of VPP schemes, so I think you will be able to. That'll be cool. Anyway, I think that's worth checking out. Finally, avoid crap solar. It's no good buying a system if it's crap, so I'll go really quickly over this. This is midday next to my Macy, who's over there, next to her gymnastics. Shade kills solar. That is not going to generate almost any energy. That's just really bad workmanship. If you choose a bad installer, you know, there's lots of things they can do wrong. I mean, that's just lazy. It's not necessarily dangerous, having them, but it is lazy. I mean, the wiring, absolute joke. You know, these are installs in the field from rushed, cheap installers. Here what they've done is, this is just down the road actually. I kind of stop on my bike and take pictures of solar. People look at me strange. What they should have done here is, they should have gone through the roof here, gone into the roof cavity, gone through the roof here, gone into the roof cavity, but they couldn't be bothered, so they just strung some conduit. Really ugly. And you know, you want to expose as little conduit to the sun as possible, in my opinion. Here they've just bunged up the end of some conduit with silicone. You're not allowed to do that. You've got to use proper glands, but they did anyway. Just rushing the job. To avoid a crap installer, if you're not sure if the solar installer that's giving you a quote is any good, Google installer name space Whirlpool. You'll get the Whirlpool forum, which is a no-holds-barred, people say whatever they want to about people. So if someone's had a bad experience or knows something dodgy about a company, bearing in mind they might be sledging their competition, but generally you'll get no-holds-barred opinions on solar installers, especially if people have had bad experiences. If you look at the reviews page online, reviews pages, there's lots of websites that do reviews, including mine. Some of the worst solar installers will try and pad them out with good reviews. My site, I think, is very good at pulling out the fake ones. But cut through the good stuff and look at the worst reviews. And if they've done something really bad, just don't go with that company. If the worst review is, oh, you know, they were a week late, or they didn't answer the phone, or, you know, it's something minor, or they just dropped the ball, that's fine. But for the really bad guys, you'll see the one-star reviews. They've done absolutely abhorrent stuff, and you'll avoid those companies. Never, ever buy the absolute cheapest system on the market. The installers will be rushed. You're asking for trouble. You can get good, cheap systems, but you can't get good, cheapest systems. good cheaper systems. And this is real generalization, and people will hate me for saying it, but most of the stuff advertised on TV and most of the stuff in the advertiser, when I look through the advertiser, I go, ooh no, ooh no. The kind of companies that I personally wouldn't go with. Sorry?
Just sub it out to whoever anyway, the big ones.
A lot of the big ones will sub it out. That's legitimate if they've got good quality control. Yeah, and they pay the installers enough. But yeah, it's more dangerous than having your own electricians, in my opinion. All right, crap solar case study. This is from Glenelg, a neighbour of my friend. He did everything wrong. He bought the cheapest system on the market, $3,649 for 5 kilowatts 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? Yeah. That was really cheap back then. Still is very cheap. Yeah, 2 years ago, there you go. He bought it off a chap who said his name was Finn, so he thought I'd sold it to him. It uses no-name panels. They're absolutely rubbish. I had a look at his panels. They're all disintegrating already. This one is actually shattered. You can't really see it because it's a bad photo, but it's sunken here. The glass is all shattered because this is facing north. They shouldn't have put a panel here without what's called an optimizer. It's in shade all the time. These things called bypass diodes are firing all day. They get hot. They burn out. Panel burns out. The whole system's operating. I'm amazed it's operating. It's operating at about 50% and going down very quickly. No name inverter. If he'd Googled the name of the solar installers, he would not have gone with this company. If he'd Googled the name of the panel, he would not have gone with this company. If he'd Googled the name of the inverter, he wouldn't have found it anywhere, and that would have been a red flag. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with the top 3 tips for buying solar, and then you can ask me any questions you want. Buy big, high-quality solar to get your bills down. This is a beautiful summer's day. Imagine that's winter, that's going to be like that. So I've got way too much solar for a summer's day, but in winter it's just right. 6.6 kilowatts is the absolute sweet spot for getting best value for money because of the way the rebate works. I won't go into why. Get monitoring. If you get monitoring, you can see reports like this in real time on your computer. You can see how to shift your loads into the solar zone. Really important, and you can get to see if your system's working properly. If your system fails or degrades and you don't have monitoring, you get hit with a big bill in 3 months, and when you're used to getting credits and you get a big bill, it's heartbreaking. After the first quarter of having solar, look around, switch retailers if you can get a better offer. We've got an investment property which we put solar on. After switching to a MASIM, my bill went into a credit, and just by switching retailers, I think I'm $600 a year better off, just by switching retailers. And that was enough to get me from a small bill into a medium bill into a good credit, little credit. Buying batteries, top 3 tips. You do not need a battery for tiny bills if you follow the tips on the last page. Unless you're in a very strange situation like you're export limited, I won't go into that. Most people do not need a battery for tiny bills in South Australia. But the subsidy is really generous if you want backup or you want insurance against them buggering around with the tariffs. Wait till January, get some quotes, and look at what you can get a battery for, because it's quite a good opportunity if you want a battery. Buy at least 10 kilowatt hours of energy. Otherwise you'll be paying way too much per kilowatt hour from what I've seen. And you don't really want less than that. You'll get frustrated, you won't have enough energy storage to get you through a lot of nights or overcast days. And check the power too. I mean, you want to look for about 5 kilowatts of power to comfortably power your home and charge quickly in winter. And specify proper backup. When you buy a battery, just use this sentence. I want the solar to charge the batteries when the grid is down. And if you're not convinced, get them to write that into the quote, then you can hold them to it. Because if you're going to buy a battery, you might as well get a good one that can do that. Because it's really good fun, being the only street in the house with lights on. And that's everything I could think of saying. How long did we go for? 8:16. Hour and a quarter, sorry, that's a bit too long. So any questions, hit me. I'm here all night. Before I go, I'm the world's worst salesman. You can buy this book for $24.99, or, I should have probably told you this before some people bought it, you can read the whole thing free online now. Go to goodsolarguide.com, 3rd yellow button down, you'll hit the table of contents. But if you want to curl up in bed with the book or on the couch, or you don't like staring at a screen, you can buy a paperback. Or you can buy it on Kindle or Amazon. That's my website, solarquotes.com.au. Insane amount of information on there. Use the search feature, it's really useful if you've got a question. You can contact me through the support desk there, and someone will get back to you. I'll send this presentation to Ben, and hopefully he can send that out to you guys. Or if you just email support@solarquotes.com.au, I can send you a copy. Questions?
Micro inverters.
Yes.
Your view on them? Like, we've got lots of shade at different times and different spots through the day.
Yeah, shade. So a few people asked me about shade before I got in. Shade kills solar, okay? Solar panels need light to work. If you've got shade, the best advice I can give you is ask the installer for a sun-eye analysis. Sun-eye, all one word. Sun-eye is a device, and there's other ones that do it just as well, but sun-eye is the main one. I've got one at home. You put it on your roof, it's got a fisheye lens on it. It draws a 360 degree, takes a picture of 360 degrees of the shade profile. It knows what angle it's at, it knows where it is in the world with GPS. It knows obviously the date and the time. Uses really clever software to know exactly how much shade will fall on your roof throughout the entire year, and it will give you a number. So it might say, the shade on your roof will give you a 75% energy yield, and what that means is the shade will kill about 25% of your energy compared to having a perfect roof. So if you've got that number, then you can make an educated decision about whether it's worth it or not. What you shouldn't do is go with the installer that goes, yeah, you'll be all right. Say, no, give me a sun-eye analysis. And even I would offer to pay a couple $100s for it, because it is a bit of an effort to do it. So ask them for a proper shade analysis. If you've got shade, if they refuse, just move to the next guy. You'll find one that will do it. Micro inverters, if you do have shade, you have dappled shade, and you get the sun-eye analysis done, and you decide that you want to go ahead, which can make sense in a lot, because a little bit of shade, you can still get great results from solar. Microinverters are definitely worth considering. Microinverters optimize each individual solar panel. If you don't do that, and shade falls on one panel, it can bring all the panels in the string down. It's like standing on a hose. You stop the flow of power through one panel, they're all connected in series, the power can't get through to the other panels. So you've got microinverters, you've got a technology called DC optimizers, which does a similar thing. Or if you've only got, top tip, if you've only got 2 or 3 or 4 panels that have a shade issue, you can buy individual optimizers and just put them on those panels, and that's much, much cheaper than getting them on everything. It's about $100 to $150 a panel extra, and then the smart installers will see which panels are going to have shade, and they'll put an optimizer on that, so you might have a stink pipe or an aerial. Microinverters, well worth it if you have shade, they'll make a big difference.
What size battery for a 3.3 kilowatt system?
Yeah, that's a pretty small system, so in the depths of winter you'll be lucky to get a kilowatt out of that. I'd put more solar on before I bought a battery. If you really want a battery, yeah, you probably don't need bigger than 6. You're going to struggle to charge, in winter you're going to really struggle to charge more than 5 or 6 kilowatt hours. But I'd consider getting more solar first, or more solar as well. You'll get much more from your battery. So, you're not, if you can't charge the battery in winter, you're not getting the benefits of the battery in winter.
Unfortunately, we're in a retirement village situation with an embedded system.
Right, okay.
Which complicates the
Yep. Some people can't put more solar on yet.
Yeah, I've always assumed that, I suspect now probably wrongly, but I thought the SA government subsidy was means tested.
The battery subsidy is not means tested. That's right, isn't it? It's not means tested. It's not means tested. Yeah, no, it's not means tested. The Victorian one is. I don't think. Is it means tested?
No, but there was another solar scheme that was.
Yeah, the Victorian. So it's confusing. There's the Victorian solar scheme is your house has got to be worth less than 3 million, and you've got to earn less than I think 180. Yeah, the South Australian battery scheme is not means tested.
Yeah, that excludes all South Australia. I ask, does having a battery inside your house, the technology of the 3 you showed us and the ones potentially coming
Yes.
made in South Australia,
Yes.
assembled in
Yes.
South Australia, are they giving off anything dangerous inside the house apart from explosion risk? Is there an atmospheric emission?
That's a really good question. In theory, yes, they vent gas. So I mean, you're not allowed to put them in areas where you live.
Okay. So
Depends on the chemistry. It's a really good question.
I've got a little room in the place that I thought I might do that, but it has blackouts every week. Every time I go down there, the microwave's going.
Yeah, the standards are you can't put them in areas where you live. You can put them in the garage and you can put them outside. You can't put them in high trafficked areas. I can't remember the exact language.
I think another factor I was going to throw in before was that the average age, no offence around here, is people are approaching a lot of the 10 so far as our lifespan is a factor or a feature of these decisions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yes? Yeah, all one word, yeah. Yeah. There's other there are other devices that do a good job, but you get mobile phone apps that do it. They're not very good in my experience. The really good guys will have a Sun Eye or a Solar Pathfinder as the other one. Yeah, they're really good. Yes.
Does roof orientation matter for the efficiency of the panels?
Yes, so the perfect roof orientation in Adelaide is pointing north and at an angle the same as the latitude, so that's about 30 degrees from horizontal. That will give you the absolute maximum energy yield per year.
We're east-west.
East-west, you're going to lose about 15% of your energy yield. But to make up for that, you're going to get more energy in the morning and more energy in the evening, towards the beginning of the day and the end of the day, because the sun rises in the east. It's shining on the east panels directly. It goes around to the west, shining on them directly before it goes down. So you should have slightly better self-consumption. But I mean, at the price of solar panels now, it's absolutely worthwhile putting them east-west. Yeah, they'll work really well. It's even, for a lot of people, if they have to, worth thinking about putting them on the south-facing roof, which a lot of installers think that's as bad as putting them upside down, but it's, south-facing in Adelaide gives you a better energy yield than perfectly facing ones in Europe, in Germany. Yeah, so it can definitely be worthwhile. Yes.
I heard about built-in inverter in the batteries. Is it a new technology that?
No, that's not new. So the Tesla Powerwall 2 has a built-in battery inverter.
Yes.
So and then you just AC couple that straight into your house. Well, it goes through another box that does the backup. That's not a new technology. That's very standard. So your solar panels need a solar inverter. Your battery needs a battery inverter. You can get what's called a hybrid inverter, which is a solar inverter and a battery inverter in one.
With this, potentially have slightly south-facing ones, is it worth paying for the structure of the roof that flips them up so that?
No, probably not. So the good installers will give you a quote. They'll tell you how much it will cost to tilt them. They'll tell you how much extra energy you'll get. It's a really simple calculation. They can look it up in a table. And you'll see, I think, that you're not going to pay for the cost of the frames or the heartbreak of seeing something so ugly on your roof. Yeah. Just put them on your roof. Yeah, flat. Yeah. Yes?
I've got one of those old analog electricity
Yep.
things sticks around.
Yep.
If I was to take a reading after 7 days and divide it by 7 and divide that by, I guess, 24 hours to get an average on my kilowatt per hour usage.
Kilowatt hours, yeah. Sorry.
Is that what I'll use to determine what size system?
Yeah, so that's a really... if you can fit it on your roof, get a 6.6 kilowatt system. It really is that straightforward in South Australia. I go into the reasons in my book, but basically you're getting the best bang for buck. It's the biggest system you can get on a single phase house, and you'll get the best deal. And because the feed-in tariff is so generous, it's worth doing. And also the last 3 kilowatts of panels are about half to a third of the price of the first 3 kilowatts, because by the time they've rolled the truck and got you on the roof, got the guys on the roof, they might as well put the extra panels on, because the rebate actually pays the hardware cost of the panels. So go for 6.6 kilowatts. But where reading your meter does make sense is if you want to get a good feel for how much your savings are going to be. When you get up in the morning, as the sun's coming up, read your meter. Just as the sun's gone down, read your meter again, subtract the two numbers. That's how many kilowatt hours you've used while the sun's up. Now, it's not perfect, but that gives you a really good feel for what your self-consumption will be. So if you use, 12 kilowatt hours between sun up and sunrise, you're probably going to cover most of those with solar most of the time. So that gives you a really good feel. Then the other thing it's really useful to do, and I go through this in the book, is if you take a meter reading at sundown and then go to bed and then take a meter reading at sun up, you get a feel for how many kilowatt hours you use through the night. And that's the size of the battery you're probably looking at if you want to cover your nighttime usage. So just, you know, those 4 meter readings, you can get a good feel for it. If you want to get really fancy, you can spend a couple $100 and get a monitoring system. You can get a graph and you can see it all. But it's probably good enough to just take those meter readings. I walk through how to do that in the book, actually. Give you a worksheet to download and everything. Yes.
Can we pay you or someone like you to come and say, okay, this is my scenario, what would be the best system for us?
You can, I don't do that, but you can, a really good solar installer will do that. And if you offer to pay him a couple of $100, he'll definitely do it. Okay. Because he knows you're serious, right? Yeah, what they're worried about, they're worried about just people wasting their time because they're very busy in South Australia at the moment. Yeah. So, I mean, the good guys will even say, look, if you pay me $200 to do your energy audit and maybe your shade analysis and you buy from me, I'll give you that off the price.
Okay. So who do we know, how do you know, because I've been watching papers and then there's people out there that advertise every week and some of them in winter the price seems to go down and then in summer it goes up and then they have these new mono panels and I get totally confused.
Yeah, generally the guys that advertise a lot on TV and then the papers are usually worth avoiding.
Oh, I wonder about that.
How do you find someone? So, okay, so I'll give you 3 ways to find someone, which are all in the book. There's a thing called Clean Energy Council Approved Solar Retailer, and you've got to use those exact words.
Clean Energy Approved
Solar Retailer.
Solar Retailer.
Clean Energy Council Approved Solar Retailer. That's a voluntary scheme above that solar companies can apply for, and it's a code of conduct for selling solar systems. Now, it's not perfect. There's a few companies on there that I wouldn't recommend, but it's a really low risk way to buy solar. And if they do the wrong thing, the Clean Energy Council, you can make a complaint to the Clean Energy Council and you've got some protection. The other way, that's why I set up my website, SolarQuotes. If you go on there and you ask for 3 quotes, I've got about 200 solar installers across Australia that I personally vet. So you can do it that way, and you can, if you want to find someone really local, you can search for a Clean Energy Council accredited installer. Now that's a person, that's an individual. And you can put in your postcode in the Clean Energy Council site and you can find someone who's really local. Now it doesn't mean they're actually any good, but it does mean they're local. And you know, yeah. So and on my site, you can go, if you don't want to use the quotes, the Get 3 Quotes service, you can click on solar installers in the footer, and then you can click on Adelaide, and there'll be a list of solar installers and all their reviews and everything, and you can just contact them manually and keep me out of the picture, and you can just deal with them direct. Yeah. Does that help?
So you vet them all,
the ones on my site all get vetted. Okay. So I've got reviews of every solar installer in Australia, even the bad ones, but the ones that are in my network that I refer to people, I personally vet every single one. I've got, I don't know, 24-point vetting checklist, and we credit check them, and we do a lot of stuff. And if they do the wrong thing, we kick them off.
And that's how you make your money?
That's how I make my money. If you go to my website, you get 3 quotes. I'll try and refer you to 3 guys, and they pay me about $36 every time I do that, whether they make a sale or not. So I don't get a commission, I just get a referral fee. As simple as that. I'll get someone at the back. I'll come back to you. Yes, sir?
If the house is on 3-phase, can you use 3-phase voltage?
No, you don't. 3-phase. If you're on 3-phase, the good news is you can get up to 30 kilowatts of solar. You have a choice. You can choose a single-phase inverter, so the solar inverter can just plug into a single phase, or you can choose a 3-phase solar inverter where it plugs into all 3 of the phases. And the choice is yours. I've got a lot of material on the blog about what to do. Your meter will be 3-phase, so you won't be. People think they're penalised if they have a single-phase inverter on a 3-phase supply. You're not. Quickly go advantages and disadvantages. It gets a bit technical. The big disadvantage of a single-phase inverter is you're pushing all the solar down one wire when you export it, so you get a slightly higher voltage rise, or quite a bit higher voltage rise. So if you have a high grid voltage, high local grid voltage, that can be an issue. The benefit of a 3-phase inverter is it pushes it down 3 wires, so you get a much lower voltage rise. But having said that, if you've got a high voltage on only 1 phase, you can't choose the phase you're going on. See, a good solar installer will work this out for you. He'll measure your grid voltage before he gives you a quote as a sign of a really good solar installer. They're meant to do that anyway, but he'll do it and he'll talk to you about it. If you get a 3-phase solar inverter, it's really hard to get apocalypse-proof backup. It's really hard to run that inverter without the grid because it needs all 3 phases. So it's up to you. Single-phase inverter, if you've got a low grid voltage in the street, will work absolutely fine. But you'll be limited to 5 kilowatts per phase. So if you want a bigger system, you have to go multi-phase. But you could have 2 single-phase inverters on 2 phases. And a good solar installer will help you out. And if it starts getting all too complicated, shoot me an email, support@SolarQuotes, and I'll give you some advice. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a quickie regarding the pitch angle of
Yep.
the solar panels. Are they set more toward winter when the solar is less, or is it worth getting up and re-angling them in autumn and spring?
Oh, you could. So, sun's lower in winter, so a steeper angle will get you more winter generation and vice versa. If you want to, I mean, it'd be quite a more complicated mechanism.
Is it worth doing?
No. Just get a couple of extra solar panels, and that'll make up for it, yeah.
Have you got, is there any merit if you find the perfect spot that's not in your house, back shed? Or
Yeah, totally. You've got to be careful because the longer the wire, the bigger the voltage rise or voltage drop. You can usually overcome that by using nice thick wire. The thicker the wire, the less you have to push the electricity. Yeah, it depends on your situation, but yeah, it's quite common that people put them on sheds and stuff. And you've got to check, a good installer will check that the roof's sound and all that stuff. It will be more expensive if you have to trench, so bear that in mind. Yeah. Yes?
If you tend to use power day and night during summer,
Yeah.
some people are home doing stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Does it make the financial equation of the battery, does it change that? It makes the battery, more...
So the current tariffs, $10,000, about $10,000 battery, if it's to save you $700, that's absolute best case, assuming that you're cycling the battery 100% every night. So if you're using, so the more energy you use at night, the more likely you are to use the whole battery. If you're using less than that, then you're going to get, your payback's going to be even less, so it could stretch out to 25 years. A good solar installer will tell you what your payback is, and the really good solar installer will split out, like I said, solar and battery, so you can decide if you just want to buy one or the other or both. Yeah. Yes?
What's a good panel?
What's a good panel? You want to know the best panel brands in Australia? SunPower, LG, Tindo, really good, and Winaco.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Winaco, Winiaco. So they're more expensive, but they're better. They're really, really good panels. I've got Tindo on my roof at home. I've got Winaco on my investment property. Yeah. Yes.
Should a solar inverter be rated the same as the voltage of your panels?
No. Good design. Should your solar inverter be rated at the wattage of your panels? Good design is to oversize your inverter by about 33%, because the rebate's based on how many panels you've got, not how big your inverter is. And that's really good practice. It just gives you a really good value for money. So that's why 6.6 kilowatts is the best size, because you're maxing out your inverter. You're getting a 5 kilowatt inverter, which is the maximum you're allowed on a single phase property. You're going 33% above that, so you're getting 6.6 kilowatts of panels on a 5 kilowatt inverter. It works really well. You get really good value for money because the rebate's based on how many panels you get. At the back.
So the solar system itself, that's the panels and the inverter, there are rebates available for that system?
Yeah, so the solar rebate is still going strong.
Okay.
When you,
So you for your average Joe who wants to get the best out of it, you only buy the batteries just because they're subsidised? So is it one or the other?
No, they're totally separate things. Totally separate things. Okay. So all the prices you see advertised for solar already include the federal solar rebate.
So if you max out the solar system and manage it properly, like you obviously do with your fixed and your eyes, that makes it sort of difficult for your average Joe, I guess, if they've got to monitor it. Would that be right?
It's just if you've got a really big system, you've got a really good feed-in tariff in South Australia, and you just get into the habit of running. I mean, look, I work at home, so it's easy, right? But we just get into the habit of running things when the sun's up, and it just becomes second nature. It's if you work, obviously, if you have to go out to work, it's harder. But for example, you put the dishwasher on in the morning, and you go dung 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 and put it on a 3-hour delay. You put the clothes in the clothes washer, dung dung, put it on a 2-hour delay. So they're staggered.
So is the battery like a comfort zone to make it less hard to manage, or is that?
You don't have to. If you've got a battery, you don't worry about it. Yeah. So don't worry about it. The battery, the battery will take care of that. You'll just use stored solar instead of the grid almost all the time if you've got a reasonably efficient household. Yeah, it means.
Can you change the amount of power that goes into the battery and then into the grid, or does that do it itself?
It depends on the battery. So it depends how the battery's programmed. Most batteries are programmed to maximise self-consumption, which means minimise grid use. So they'll take the solar. The solar will satisfy the house demand first. If there's any spare solar, it will try and charge the battery. If the battery goes full, it'll export it to the grid. And then going the other way, the house will always try and use solar first, then battery, then grid.
And it does it by itself? You don't have to sort of...
No, it's all automatic, yeah, you don't even have to. The nice thing about a battery is set and forget, you don't have to worry about it. And they can do even much cleverer things than that if you want to get fancy, if you buy the right battery. Yeah, like they can... there's a storm coming. They can predict there's a storm coming and say, right, I'm just going to charge the battery to full and leave it at full, not drain it. So if there is a storm, you've got as much energy as possible. All sorts of clever stuff. It's all software driven. Yes?
If you've got a single-phase inverter, like a 3-phase air conditioner,
yes.
And want to put in a battery system, is the battery only going to cover single-phase loads, not the 3-phase load, like the air conditioner?
So in physics terms, all the power is going to go down one phase. But in accounting terms and billing terms, which is what you really care about, you won't be worse off. Because your meter, the meter that's measuring how much you import and how much you export, adds everything together before it subtracts the imports from the exports. Does that make sense? So it's easier with a diagram, but the physics of it is it's all powering it on one phase. But when you get billed for it, it's as if it was powering them on all the phases. So if your air conditioner is pulling 10 kilowatt, if your air conditioner is pulling 3 kilowatts, and your solar system on all 3 phases, and your solar system is pushing 3 kilowatts on just a single phase, you're getting charged 0. Because the meter is adding up all the phases, it's taking away 3 kilowatts from 3 kilowatts, and it's billing you for 0 at that moment in time.
What if you use the air conditioner at night?
Then you're drawing it from the grid. Or you'll try and draw it from the battery first.
Can you use the battery power at night to power the air conditioner?
So what the batteries can do, if they're clever, is it can see that you're using. So say you're using 3 kilowatts, a 3 kilowatt air conditioner at night. What your battery can do, although the phase it's only on. All right, start again. 3-phase air conditioner, 1-phase battery. The air conditioner is pulling 3 kilowatts, 1 kilowatt on each phase. Yeah? The battery is only connected to one phase. It's got 2 choices. It can just push 1 kilowatt into the phase it's on, and that will just balance that phase. But the good batteries will push 3 kilowatts into that phase, so the meter thinks you're not drawing any energy from the grid, even though you are in reality, and you won't get charged for running that air conditioner. That's totally legal. That's how the meter works.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so they can handle that. Yeah. You can also get 3-phase batteries, if that's what you want. But the single-phase batteries can handle that, yeah. It causes a lot of confusion, because if you think in physics terms, you're going, hang on, there's electrons going out there, and because you are actually exporting or import. You are actually importing from the grid, in reality, but not for metering. Yeah, at the back.
Putting solar on an investment property, what are the considerations there? Like, is it a no-brainer or an extra?
Oh, it's totally down to you. So our investment property is Airbnb. So the short-term tenants don't pay the electricity bill, so they absolutely cane it. They go on, switch the air conditioning on, leave it on for a month, and then leave. So for us, that was a no-brainer, right? Because we want to minimize. We're paying the electricity bill. If you're not paying the electricity bill, then it's an ethical thing, I guess. You can get There's companies out there that will install a system where you both make money, you and the tenants. You might want to look at that. There's lots of examples on my blog.
You can also charge more in rent.
Or you can just charge more in rent, as Jono says. You know, do a deal with the, you know, if that's cool with the tenant. Is it a no-brainer? You can both make money out of it. You can both make a modest return if you put solar on an investment property. I personally think I've rented most of my life. Don't rent anymore, but yeah, it really saddens me that renters are stuck with high electricity bills, whereas those of us that own our roofs, you can just whack big solar on, think about how much you consume, and you know, in 2018, no one should have an electricity bill, in my opinion.
One more question.
One more question, apparently. Who hasn't asked one? 2 more questions. Yes.
If you have existing solar, I've got it years ago.
Yes.
For the rebate, and I've got another roof line, and I put it in. The payback money will be less, won't it?
You want a premium feed-in tariff? When did you get your solar?
10 years ago.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you'll be on a premium feed-in tariff. If you are, you'll lose it if you expand your system.
Oh, straight away.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's important.
So is it worth then putting a battery in?
How big is your system?
It's only 1.5 kilowatts.
It's probably worth you're probably exporting almost nothing. If you look at your bill, look at how much how much money you're getting for your exports. Because your system's so small, if you're an average household, you're probably exporting bugger all. So the premium feed-in tariff is probably worth very little to you. Just look at your bills and see how much you get. If you're still getting big bills, are you? No?
140.
Right, so you're getting low bills, so you're going to struggle. You're going to really struggle to charge a battery with a small system like that.
So is it worth it?
Wouldn't have thought so.
No.
You haven't really got a problem, you've got low bills.
Oh yeah.
Unless you want backup.
Yeah.
Blue t-shirt, last question.
If the roof material is asbestos,
Yes.
could this kind of roof can be added to the solar system?
There are some solar installers that will install on asbestos, but they're very hard to find. Yeah. It's not impossible, but you have to do your research, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Was that useful?
Yeah.
Cool. I think we're done.